Joining me now is Democratic Senator Chris Dodd, who's very much a candidate for president. Senator Dodd, thank you for joining us. First question, is President Bush changing his policy or simply staying the course post-surge?
It sounds like he's staying the course. Chris, I listened to read the remarks rather today in Ohio, and I didn't hear any change there at all. He talked about the commanders on the ground dictating the troop levels, but frankly, the realities on the ground are dictating the troop levels. And so I didn't hear much of a change at all. Hence, I think we're going to have a very strong debate here over the next 2 weeks on the defense authorization bill, and hopefully going to come up with some clear date lines here, some deadlines for redeploying or withdrawing our troops out of Iraq.
The only candidate who's running as a complete Bush defender, in fact, has clad himself as a Bush defender almost to the point of wearing a uniform, is John McCain. John McCain is in big trouble. His campaign's apparently coming apart. His top leadership have been ousted and resigned in one case and pushed out in another case, apparently. Now he finds himself in single digits in Iowa, having started as a front runner. Is this war an albatross for any Republican who carries it with him?
I think listen, people are so far ahead of Washington on this issue. I just came back from doing almost a 2,000-mile trip from the Mississippi, the Missouri River over 4.5 days, 24 events in Iowa. And I can just tell you, Chris, the people are so far ahead of us on this. They believe this is a failed policy. They have great respect. I can't tell you the thunderous applauses I got every place where I said, would you please join me for a minute, regardless of your views on Iraq, and thanking our men and women in uniform for the job they're doing. There's great respect for what these kids, these young people by and large have done here, but there's also just dismay over the fact that this president and those who support him continue to believe that our ability to be there militarily to solve a civil war is just insane, and they're really worried over the fact that this president's going to persist in this, and they want us out of there. They believe there's a better chance with a robust diplomacy. Henry Kissinger this morning in the Washington Post laid out some ideas diplomatically which the Bush administration ought to be listening to if you're really going to try and get a stable situation in Iraq and get our troops home.
You're running for president, Senator Dodd. If you were president right now, would you pull our troops out?
I'd start redeploying them immediately here.
Would you pull them out of Iraq? We have 160-some thousand troops over there. Would you remove them from Iraq?
I would get them out of Iraq without any question. But simultaneously, Chris, I'd be engaging in a very robust diplomacy, both regionally, internationally, and within Iraq itself here. None of that seems to be happening very effectively. That's the only long-term solution that's going to bring stability there and allow us to regain our moral authority. But I'd begin this evening getting our troops out of Iraq.
62% of the American people, according to the latest USA Today poll, believe it was a mistake to go into Iraq. Do you agree with them?
I do. And I said, look, I cast the vote in the fall of 2002. None of us like to admit mistakes. That was a mistake. I wish we hadn't had that vote. But in my view now, it's an interesting question and certainly a relevant one. The more important question is, what would you do now? For the last 7 months, I've advocated the same position here. It's time to get these troops out of Iraq. They'll tell you themselves over there. Chris, I was at Walter Reed a couple of weeks ago with a kid from Torrington, Connecticut. He said, proud of his service, that would go back tomorrow, by the way, but said, Senator, listen, we go and spend a month and a half trying to clean out an area. Within an hour and a half, and I'm quoting him, an hour and a half after we leave, it's right back where it was the month and a half before. These people will not tell us where the IEDs are. They won't tell us where the ammo dumps are. And frankly, they're disappointed, believe that, frankly, our presence there isn't going to resolve this issue, this civil war.
Can you take the heat of the charge who lost Iraq if the Republicans do end up buckling and blame the loss of the war on the Democrats? Can your party take the hit?
Listen to Jim Baker and Lee Hamilton and others. Listen to our military leaders. There was never going to be a military solution in Iraq. How can you have a defeat or victory when you can't have a military solution? No one's ever believed that our military was going to necessarily win this civil war in Iraq. So that's a false argument, in my view. And if you're truly interested in the United States regaining its footing, regaining its authority, making a difference in that part of the world, then withdrawal of our troops out of Iraq is the only way, in my view, to get that done.
Well, it looks like someone in this administration is orchestrating a lot of voices in opposition to what you've just been saying, Senator. Ambassador Ryan Crocker, our ambassador over in Iraq, has just come out and said that if we pull out, there's going to be increased violence and all-out regional conflict. Of course, we are aware now that the Turkish army stands on the border. What do you think will happen when we leave?
Well, first of all,
if we leave,
it couldn't get much more chaotic than it is. How much more information, how many more stories do you have to hear every morning about 140 people dying, 150 people dying, 11 more soldiers losing their lives over there? And frankly, the Turkish army on the border up there has already been discounted by the administration. Is not something to be terribly concerned about at this juncture here. So frankly, I think the idea that it's going to be more chaotic, I'm not suggesting to you this is going to all of a sudden end when we withdraw our troops in the area. But I presently believe that continuing our presence there has turned into Iraq into a petri dish for Islamic jihadists. It's given them a cause to live all over the world. It's made it almost impossible for this situation to get resolved politically and diplomatically within the region. So a change of course is absolutely essential in my view. And anyone who spent any time looking at this, I think, agrees with that conclusion, including a growing number of Republicans.
You represent New England, of course, Connecticut, in the United States Senator, do you believe that that part of the country, your part of the country, is now especially antagonistic toward this war?
Well, I don't think it's one part of the country, Chris. Again, I just told you I spent a week in Iowa going across that state. Spent time in New Hampshire, South Carolina as well, obviously as part of this presidential campaign. And again, I'm just telling you, there's great respect for our troops. I can't begin to tell you the depth of feeling for these young men and women serving over there, but there is equally strong feelings about this failed policy and how Americans across the board, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, look, they want to see the United States back on its feet again. I think a good part of the world does. And frankly, we're not going to get there as long as we persist in the president's view that we'll have no change here whatsoever. We're going to stay the course no matter what. That's hurting our country very, very much, puts our soldiers and sailors at risk. It's weakened our military. It's hurt us diplomatically all over the world. We need a change in direction. It's what I've been advocating, and we'll try again in the next couple of days to offer some language here to cut off this funding, bring it to a close over the next 7 or 8 months, and let's move on simultaneously with a kind of effort that could make a difference.